Ladies and gentlemen, interesting session today. I'm going to introduce you to Jes Johansen, who's the co-founder and CEO of Storefriendly in Singapore, which is probably the leading self-storage operator in Singapore. But within the Storefriendly family, there are other geographies in Asia Pacific, and I think Jes will talk about that. The reason we've included this is that self-storage is attracting a considerable amount of institutional investment interest of late. Certainly, I first came across it in Tokyo with another group about 5-6 years ago, and I personally find it a fascinating sort of sector. I know that Storefriendly has a big focus on technology and space efficiency, and I think Jes will probably talk about that. Jes, we're in a virtual world still at the moment. You know, we will be sharing your presentation and any discussion that you and I have with the group a little later. But for the time being, can I hand over to you, and we'll pick up questions. Either I'll rudely interrupt, or I'll less rudely wait until the end, and we can pick up some questions then. Jes, thank you.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be able to share a bit about who we are in Storefriendly and the journey that we have been on, and how we see it playing going forward. I think it's very relevant for you to get in touch and ask, as an alternative real estate product, how does self-storage fit into that? So let me try and explain to you sort of who we are and what we've gone through, and yeah, feel free to ask questions, and I'll try and elaborate. Okay. I don't seem to be able to do next slide. Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, so here's an agenda. I'll try and introduce who we are, then I'll ask why specifically Storefriendly, and then how we're set up to deal with this. A bit about who we are. It's basically me and Kevin, who does Storefriendly. We separated into North and South. He takes care of Hong Kong. I take care of Singapore. And we are, you know, we're interesting people in our own right. We are very much we always say, you know, 1 + 1 is sometimes more than 2, and sometimes you can even make it up to 11. We are, both of us, very, very different. Our backgrounds are different, our ages are different, our geography is different, you can see we look quite different, and we certainly we gel very well. I'll try and explain to you on how the whole relationship and the journey has kicked off, because I think that's an interesting element in the Storefriendly story. But we're very much fans of sort of having a partnership approach. Entrepreneurship can sometimes be very lonely, and when you are, you know, when you got somebody to join on that journey, then that is not to be sniffed at. Anyway, so milestones started in 2002. Now the world in 2002 was a very, very different place. It started by Kevin in Hong Kong, and the story, I think, is interesting. It started, as you remember, in 2002. If we look back a couple of years before that, you had the change of the millennium. At that stage, Kevin was graduating from university, studying a computer science degree. What was going on at the turn of the millennium was the millennium bug. Some of you will remember that. Some of you probably won't, I would guess. But the millennium bug was what sort of, it was a big thing going on. All the computer systems in the world, are they going to come to a halt on one day? Now, what Kevin was doing in university was effectively optimizing systems to prepare them for the next day into the new millennium. Now, instead of doing that in class, his entrepreneurial drive sort of took him outside and went to real companies and asked them, do you have this issue? And they all said, yes, we do. And he said, well, can we help you with that? So he and his fellow students basically solved assignments on the spot for other companies, and then got the professor to review what they were doing. Effectively, he was selling his schoolwork to real companies, and left university with $1 million US in the bank. That is crazy and true entrepreneurship, and that says a lot about how Kevin is and how he thinks, and one of the real reasons why I value the association with him a lot. Anyway, what started then was that having done that and then graduated with a computer science degree, Kevin then says, okay, now what? So in the early part, that stage, there's a 9/11 happened, there was a dot-com bust, and in this part of the world, there was SARS, and all of those weighed heavily on the markets. Now, graduating in that environment is complicated, and he goes, okay, what am I going to do? His dad and his uncle have a metals workshop in Guangzhou, China, where they got an inquiry from an American company, a self-storage company, that says, here in America, we produce self-storage units, and they're all sort of roller doors and big sheds. We would like to do some smaller units, and we want to have swing doors. Can you, here are some designs, can you make these doors? And they said, yep, we can do that. So they produced these doors, put them in a container, or put them in a container, send it off to America. Now, Kevin gets wind of this and he goes, okay, self-storage, this could actually be interested in Hong Kong. So what they did was they took some of those doors and made some makeshift storage units and put them on a square in Hong Kong and asked people walking past, what if we build this in your neighborhood? Would you use this and would you pay for it? And it was really, really basic marketing work on the ground. And there was very good feedback to that. I said, yeah, we'd love to have that. As you all know, Hong Kong is very space constrained, and a solution such as that fits in nicely to a lot of people's lives. So with some homemade software, with some homemade partition systems, with the $1 million in a bank, he went out and started the business and basically said, okay, I need some space to do it. Now, real estate in Hong Kong is very much strata title based. So he went and looked at some strata title places. So like 10,000 square feet. Warehouses in Hong Kong are vertical structures, one floor at a time. Very different from most other markets. But it's all strata title, so you can take one floor, 10,000 square feet-ish at a time. And at that stage, don't get shocked, but at that stage, real estate in Hong Kong was dirt cheap. We're talking about $200 Hong Kong a square foot in 2002. That is, in today's market, is around $5,000 a square foot. So it's gone up 25 times. Real estate is where you can make a lot of money, which I guess you're all sitting here listening to this. So when you can invest in that market, I mean, the hindsight is a glorious thing, but it started opportunistically at that time. But even with $1 million, and even going and buying 3 strata titles, and even having a successful kickoff to the business, at that stage, capital becomes a restricting factor in continued expansion. Now, one of the storage customers knocks on the door and says, how interesting is this product? I would love to be part of this journey. How do I become part of this? And he became franchisee #1. It was then decided, let's go on a franchising journey. We had the systems, had the partitions, had the brand, had the operating know-how, but needed some fresh capital or some kind of expanding and making use of this business idea. So franchising was pursued, and within 5 years there were like more than 50 branches in Hong Kong. So it took off really quickly. Now, my own background at that stage was in the mid 2000s, 2005. I came back to Singapore. I'd been in Singapore in the 90s. I came back to Singapore with another opportunity, but that didn't work out. And I ran into a guy who was doing self-storage construction business. He was managed out of Australia, and they needed somebody to take that business into Asia, based in Singapore. And that became me. So my job was then to introduce self-storage to various markets in Asia. It had taken off in America in the 50s and 60s. It was introduced into UK in sort of the 90s and noughties, 90s really. And then Europe sort of around the millennium, turn of the millennium, and then Asia came in the 2000s and 2010s. And that was very much my job to ensure that happened. So I got introduced to Kevin fairly early. We got on very well. And I told him to buy the product that I had. And he said, listen, we got our own factory in China. This is going to be difficult. So we never managed to work together that way. I did that job for 5 years. I then had an idea of the market could go into a different direction of where it was going. And all my local customers said, no, just, make what we order. We don't want you thinking about it. And that is then really a typical entry into entrepreneurship. Is you have an idea of how the market should be managed or dealt, and nobody wants to do it. So it comes to you really to do it in the end. So that became my journey. And that was in 2011. I then set up my own company. And then I reached out to Kevin and said, I know everything about the industry as a supplier, but I've never actually operated. And I think I would like some support on that. He and I, after a 10-minute discussion, became partners. We did that in Singapore. It worked very well. That spilled over into an overall engagement on my side in the whole store-friendly setup. But it then became, in terms of execution, that I was running the south of Singapore and all the markets, and Kevin would run Hong Kong and other markets there. And that has continued. What we did very quickly, we did the same sort of franchising setup, and then we sold the business in Singapore to SingPost in 2015, as you can see there on the slide. We had a 2-year non-compete. For various reasons, SingPost didn't want to keep the brand, but we had a license agreement with them. So we effectively, after a little more than a year, we got paid to get the brand back, which was a fun day in itself. But so now we had control of the brand again, and we decided to relaunch the business, which we then did in 2019 with own money. And if I close down a little bit like this, then you can see in 2021, we then went on to an onboarding of, shall we say, institutional investment money. We signed up with Partners Group in Singapore and Blackstone in Hong Kong to sort of transform and institutionalize our business. So this was for a very simple slide here, quite a long story, but I hope you now understand a little bit about how it started. And I'll try and tell you about now from a real estate perspective, how it then becomes hopefully of interest to somebody like you. So why do self-storage? Why do it in Singapore? Well, it is a high growth sector. It is a high margin business with strong stabilization characteristics and low cost. By that, we mean that when you get a self-storage customer, they all think they move in for 3 months and 3 years later, they're still there. It's very non-cyclical, very resistant to recession. You could actually turn that around and say it is boosted in times of recession. Like COVID has been a massive booster for our industry. People work from home, free up space, etc. So it is a unique industry in many ways. You get secondary income, and it's set up from a real estate perspective. We make use of buildings that nobody else really sees a great need for. These are typically converted factories or rundown warehouses, which move on to, say, heavy logistics. You need to do in and out all day. That doesn't work in old style buildings, so we will go in and take those. It could be a manufacturing assembly plant of, say, textiles or something like that, which is now outsourced to other low-cost economies. We go in and take those kinds of buildings, we pretty them up, and we then make use of those. And at the core of what kind of business we are effectively a yield-enhancing business. Now, real estate, to a large extent, real estate investment certainly is a yield-generating endeavor. And what we do with our unique execution is to take a building, an industrial building, and say a market like Singapore will generate a yield of 6 to 8%. It's an established return. You can go and buy REIT shares in REITs in the local market, and that's typically what they generate. With us, we can buy a similar building. We can get that up to 12, sometimes even 18%. It does have a cost and it does have a timing, but the end result is a much higher yielding business.
Yes, could I ask a question?
Sure.
At that point? Particularly in Singapore, where land and property is highly regulated in terms of its use, and to a certain extent in Hong Kong as well, has that been a challenge? Have you had to, did you have to persuade the authorities that self-storage was, a legitimate use, industrial use, or what?
Sure. Absolutely. Singapore is a unique country because it is so small and very land scarce, and there is, from the government's perspective, a constant focus on optimization of land. Properties are majorly managed through a leasehold model of a certain temporary nature, and whatever activity you do, you can have, if you get approval for it, and you can use it for a certain period of time, and then we, the government, reserve the right to yank it away from you and use something else. From an investor's perspective, that makes it somewhat challenging, but there's established sort of precedents of how that is managed. As a government, I fully understand. If I ran Singapore, I'd probably do something similar. Why you can't have low yielding, low generating industries take care of a very attractive piece of real estate forever without any optimization potential. So I understand why they're doing that. From our perspective, then what we do is say, listen, if you want to manage, look at apartment sizes. In Singapore, the average apartment size about 20 years ago was about double of what it is today. Typically, we refer to these as shoebox units, but apartments are getting smaller and smaller. There's greater population density, and because of that, a product such as a self-storage product is needed in Singapore. And if you look at this specific graph or this specific slide and see that Singapore is actually quite underserved compared to comparable markets. So if you look in America, you see number of persons per storage unit built is 1 to 10. By that, I mean there are 330 million people in America, and there's 33 million storage units built. In Singapore, that's 1 in 150, or a ratio of 1 to 15. It's 15 times bigger in America, and America has more space per population head, so and less disposable income. So if you look at it on that basis, Singapore should certainly be able to accommodate a greater self-storage presence. But going back to your question, Keith, yes, we need to convince the authorities of our particular execution of self-storage, and with our technological approach, and saying it's not just, you know, a shed. This is an optimized business with land optimization potential, and that then speaks to their you know, their preferences. They do like that. Okay. Feel free to stop me at any time.
No, it's okay.
Market differentiation, we try and go in, we optimize our positioning in the market, we air condition everything we do, so on that basis we take a premium. The slide here shows there's always a correlation between size of space and cost of space. The bigger space you take, the less you pay for it on a square foot basis. So we focus on a smaller part of the, you know, we give a smaller, more compressed solution to customers. So we can even go out and say we're cheaper than the competitors, because you see, we do an average of $180 a unit, where others are charging more, but on a per square foot basis, we managed to even surpass them quite by a lot, 50%, as you see. We do our execution is we go in, and it's more than just self-storage. We do what we call work friendly, which is sort of co-working spaces. We do we focus a lot on the active element of storage. Like storage traditionally was you put your things in there and you forget about it. The modern execution of self-storage is much more catered to an active use of it. You have e-commerce traders who don't want a warehouse and they don't want an office. They want a mixture of the two. They want a hybrid model. They want to be able to get their wares in and out, and they want to be able to sit there and transact. They may even want to have a studio to do some live streaming facilities and that kind of thing. It's an evolving product that we have. Here's some pictures of what it looks like, and if you look at all these pictures, my mantra very much is focusing on cleanliness and brightness. So it needs to be light, it needs to be bright, it needs to be clean. Everybody, when they think storage, and I mean literally everybody in the world, they think of some tired old warehouse, dusty machinery moving to and from. When we manage to get them in to visit our facilities, every single time they go, this is nice, this is clean, this is safe. And those are the things that we want customers to take away, and then they will make use of it. We then do co-working spaces, so you can either work inside a unit or in a sort of common setup, and we try and make it nice and attractive.
Yes, Jes, can I just ask, I mean, how rapidly has it evolved into this clean, the images that you're showing us now? I mean, I do remember self-storage here in Hong Kong 10 years ago, and it was as you just described it, dirty, grubby. You know, it was okay when you got onto the floor, but nothing like what you're showing here and what I've seen in more lately. How rapidly did it evolve?
I think there's always, I mean, go back to the previous slide where you see we charge more than the competitors, and this is one of the distinguishing factors. So there's still quite a lot of self-storage that is non-air conditioned, that is quite dark. There is the old saying that the worst thing you can do to things in storage is to sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Let me shut up. The worst thing you can do to things in storage is expose it to light. Now, if you think of the old retail shops down the main street, and you look at clothes that have been in a shop window for 2 months, they're generally faded, and from that aspect you can understand you don't want to expose things you put in storage to light. That is true. What you do want, though, is to have the facilities brightly lit and attractive, but the things you store must be covered. So they must be in boxes. They must be in some state where it is protected from light. So those are two almost contrasting sensations that you're selling there, but it is part of it. When is it started? I think self-storage, inside in the industry, we say we're now on version 3 or 4, and it becomes, you know, from the old, the first ones in America are drive-up units. It's in one level only. It's a massively unintensive land use, and now it's becoming more intensive land use. So it goes, it's on several levels, and then it becomes clean. It becomes greater focus on supporting services, light, security, etc. We are definitely on the forefront of this, but of course, when we do this execution, others look at it and others will copy part of what we do.
Right.
Let me show you a video here of our latest innovation. Yeah, so there you go. So that is what we call Storefriendly Go, which is our robotic execution, and as I alluded to before, a more technologically heavy interpretation of what self-storage is. What it means for us is we can take a building in Singapore, and the net lettable area we can get from approximately 60% to more than 80%. So it means we can improve the intensity, the usage of our space by a third. And of course, in our industry, the cost of what we do is primarily in the space, the cost of space. It is less in staff and other supporting costing. So for that reason, this is where we focus our energy on trying to optimize the space intensity. And obviously both customers, regulators, investors, everybody loves this kind of thing. So that's why we do it that way. Yeah, are we good? You still there?
Yep.
Right, good. Now, another element then becomes, we're talking real estate here. So the important thing for us is to source the properties. The map that you're looking at is Singapore. And we then must operate in industrial zones. So it's an industrial activity. That means we must be in an industrial zone, and those are then highlighted on this map. We must be there. You see that's very heavily concentrated in the west. So that big area that you see on the west, which is Tuas area, is not of interest to us, because our industry, our product is servicing primarily a residential and a small business customer, and those operate not in major heavy industry setups. They must be close to where people live. So we must be in any of these pink squares here, or pink areas. Then there are certain areas that we exclude. So we can't be in the in the airport area. We can't be in military area. We can't be in heavy industry. In the middle of Singapore, there's a big reservoir, so you can't be there. And the CBD is not, our kind of activity is not allowed. So we got to be outside of those areas. And then we look at, okay, where do people live? So that's in these green circles here. And we say, okay, if you look at, I don't know, which one are we going to take? Let's say 540,000, right, which is in this sort of Pai Liba, Eunos, Geylang area, maybe out to Bedok of Singapore. In that area, you got 540,000 people, 500. So we want to have something, we want to have a strong presence there, etc. That's the way we look at things. This is where we are now in terms of we have 8 branches, we have 4 that we own. We have found and converted these assets here. The one that's called Storefriendly Center in the bottom right here is where I am. This was the first one we bought with our own money and converted, and then went to the market and say we want funding to keep expanding along these lines. We expect we'll end up in a couple of years with 10 of these assets and have a nice, good portfolio. We will fill that up and that will then reach a stabilization. And then at that stage, it's probably time for a different kind of money to look at what we do, i.e. we will sell it or list it or something like that.
Yeah.
So this is where we are. We're still looking into getting into those other circles. There's areas that you see there. The plan is then that we will have, we do it separately. We have in Singapore, we have a partners group as our backers for acquiring properties. In Hong Kong, we work with Blackstone. Kevin manages one, I manage the other. And then in either case, we go and buy buildings, which is then with partners or Blackstone, and we have some leased branches to complement our market presence, and those are then taken care of by us and by the operating company. So it is very much a opco-propco execution that we have, and for that we then the opco then takes some fees in terms of the property operation fee, marketing fee, asset management fee, and project management fee. So our model is very closely aligned or similar to a hotel model, except we also have the development side of things. We are very much involved in finding and converting and developing the assets that we target for our acquisition. Let me show you here then how this typically plays out. Now, this is obviously an example, but if we go out and acquire an asset, say it's 10,000 or 10 million, sorry, there's the standard industrial, which will then generate an income based on a square foot income level or tenancy level, and we'll get to at some stage you'll be able to exit that business at 12.7 million or a multiple on invested capital of 1.3. The self-storage model is a yield enhancing model. So if you look at the important, I think there's some highlight. The important thing here is the rental rate on a gross floor area basis goes from 1.58 to 331. i.e. it's a more than doubling of the income, and that's ultimately what is attractive here. There is a slightly lower operating margin because we have staff, we have a more active involvement, but it is relatively minor, so it's still a very healthy operating margin of 80%, and a much improved EBITDA. In this example here, you get a net yield of 12.4. This here is all in unlevered, right? So when you get debt financing, we can boost these figures here.
The capital expenditure, is that fairly standard? 15% of the you'd expect to be putting in for capex to improve a building. Is that sort of 15% of the purchase price?
It is representative. It does depend. We buy,
Yeah,
like
sure.
I say, we buy assets. We're not a greenfield or brownfield developer. We take existing assets and we A&A it. We optimize it. And some of them are, barely standing, so
Yeah.
then the capital expenditure will be higher. Some of them are pristine and it will be lower. We've done some that are less than 10%.
Right. Okay.
So it does depend. It does depend also. The acquisition price is very much impacted by what kind of leasehold you have. In a market like Singapore, you have basically three ownership types. You have a regulated leasehold through JTC.
Yeah.
You have a less regulated leasehold through Singapore Land Authority, SLA, or you have a completely, your own, which is a freehold. And that, you can do whatever you want pretty much in those, but the price there is very much higher. So.
And all your facilities, both the leased and the acquired, on the lease, the leasehold base, the renting basis and the acquisition basis, are they, once they're up and running, are they 24/7 facilities, or people can come in at any time?
Yeah.
It's all, and is it all digitized, entrance, etc.? Yeah.
You can sign up during office hours.
Right.
So when you can sign up, we're doing some online. We're slow in Singapore in order to allow customers to sign up online because, for various reasons, but mostly it relates to that when customers inquire about self-storage, you say, okay, how much space do you need? They have no idea. They don't know. And for that reason, are quite hesitant to sign up to something that they're not coming. They just don't know what they need. Our website and others tries very much to tie them, get a greater understanding. If you got this many items, this many suitcases, and this many boxes, and you need this much space. But they quite frequently get it wrong. And for that reason, it is very much, it's still an interactive sales experience. You need, at the end, you need a square foot of an area of 24 square feet. And, here's how we manage that. We sort of package that as saying, you don't know what you need. Welcome to Storefriendly. We're the experts on this. And we'll sort of handhold you through this process. And if we get it wrong, we got another unit size to fit your exact need. So then you sort of eliminate the reservation, if you will.
The other side of that, of course, is we as users don't know how long we want them for, because as you alluded to earlier, I mean, we had a self-storage unit here and we thought it was going to be temporary for 6 months, and 2.5 years later we were still wondering what we were going to do with it.
We love people like you. But that's the way it is, right? And
yes, it is. That's the reality. Yeah.
And it is also because the smaller spaces that we focus on very much are an extension of your home solution. Because your living space is less, if you get a small 24 square foot room, it's like your storage room at home, but just not at home anymore because your home got smaller. So now you sort of outsource that part of it. We have typically 3 types of customers. We got the home extension ones that I just alluded to. Then we have the home renovation or moving house people that take everything in your home and move into a bigger unit. And then when renovation is finished, everything goes out again. So that's a temporary solution. And then you've got the business users who are sort of bigger spaces again and use on an ongoing basis to support their business needs.
Yes, yes.
So those are generally 3 groups of customers that we work with. And then we say here on which type of customer we try very much to segment. This is a bit of a marketing spiel here, right? But we try to portray it as very nice and attractive and strong colors. We got our Storefriendly Go robots here, right? But we try and pitch to something. In Asia, we're still very much in a market developing mode, as I alluded to, 1 in 150 in Singapore, right? So we got to get those 150 people to sort of have an interest in this. And then we say, if you're a small business owner, take interest. If you're a collector or socializer, action seeker, whatever it may be, you should make use of this kind of product. That's kind of where our marketing is focused.
Jes, I've got a couple of questions. Could we go back a few slides to the one where you show partners and Blackstone? Yes, that one, yeah. Now, the Blackstone in particular, they always talk about scale and scalability. That's what they're looking for. Partners, little I know, they're similar as well. How is that a challenge for you and Kevin? You know, because they're looking to scale up, to expand geographically as well. That's and yet, you know, there is an exit potential for both Singapore and Hong Kong. So just curious about that.
Sure. Good, relevant question, and is very much an issue. We have in both cases, we have a good, strong pipeline that is part of like this is who we are as operators and you know, as entrepreneurs. What they then say, that's great, congratulations, but is it scalable? You know, can we bring this to a size that's of interest to us? Because frankly, investing $50 million for these guys is nothing, right? You need to go into the hundreds of millions, otherwise they are not part of it. So yeah, that is very much the case, which is why I say in Singapore we're aiming for something like maybe 10 properties. Average acquisition price on the ones we look at is, you know, 30 to 40 million. So with that, you're deploying, say, 300-400 million. Half of that is going to be debt, so about, you know, maybe 200 million. Then they're interested. In Hong Kong, it's easier to spend money because real estate is ridiculously expensive. Yeah. So so the size element is easier to cater to, or the investment size. You then have, you know, there's a reason why we work with two different companies, because one didn't want to be in Hong Kong and the other one didn't want to be in Singapore. So you know, you sort of, there's some geopolitical concerns perhaps, and you know, in Singapore is very well maintained and regulated, but perhaps more controlled, and that appeals to a different kind of investor.
I always thought Blackstone wanted to be everywhere, but there you go.
Yeah, I mean, they do. I mean, don't get me wrong, they do a lot of things in Singapore too.
Yeah, sure. And how do they? I mean, is there a with you and Kevin, your cores are Hong Kong and Singapore. Are you looking to expand beyond those shores? And is there alignment therefore with partners or Blackstone? Not that you're tied to them, there are other players out there as well that are interested, but you know, are you looking at where are you going next? I think that's the easiest question.
Yeah, I mean, we're probably Asian focused, or we are Asian focused.
Yeah,
I think there are other very interesting markets in the region, and we are looking at other markets actively. I don't want to necessarily show our hand too much on that, but we're certainly there are other markets of great interest. Now, self-storage, the execution is going to be similar, but the property side of things is very different in each market. And when you buy property, you've got to understand what you're buying and what you can do and what you can't. What looks attractive is maybe not really attractive once you really understand how things play. So we do need, in each case, we do need a strong representation in that market. So say if we were going to, I don't know, say Japan or Korea or, you know, China, Malaysia, each of those markets in terms of real estate and how that plays out is very different.
Mm.
Hong Kong and Singapore. The self-storage execution, we can certainly, no problem on that front. But the property side of things, and you know, or that we need some good local partners to work with on that front.
Okay. And again, just touching on the technology, you know, the Storefriendly Go, is that advancing all the time? Are you looking at technology to reduce operational costs, perhaps? And
sure. Sure. Like I said, the major part of our cost is in the space, and if we can optimize space, then there's a great saving there.
Yeah.
We are looking also in terms of, you know, some staff optimization and signing up online, and you know, something, an execution of the whole journey which is more done online with less need for background follow-up, you know, finance staff and that kind of thing. But yeah, the Storefriendly Go we developed about 2 years ago first, and has been good and is successful. Certainly has room for improvement also. We have been halted a little bit during COVID we work with some Chinese partners on that, and as you know, getting people in and out of China to come and work with us on certain things is still very difficult.
Yes.
So a little bit of a delay on what we would otherwise have done, I think is fair to say.
Okay.
But yeah, we will keep developing that product.
Right. And lastly, could I just ask you to go to that pile of the 540,000, you know, population that you targeted, the Storefriendly Center where you are at the moment.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of that facility, how many people are actually on your side involved in that facility in terms of security and operationally? I'm not necessarily talking about your office, but just managing the facilities. Three people.
3 people.
Wow. Yeah. And what's the size of that facility?
So it's 132,000 square feet, GFA.
Yeah.
We have is a very good, well executed industrial building. We got a net lettable area or net usable area of 92. So very good intensive use of space. And again, so of that 92%, we can then do either 60% or 80% efficiency of that, or something in between, right?
Right.
Typically in self-storage, if you focus on smaller areas, then you will get a lower efficiency because you need more corridors to access those smaller spaces. So then it's 60%. If you go to bigger units, you can go up to something like mid 70s sometimes.
Okay. And just finally, my last question, in terms of facilities that you're showing here, how do you measure vacancy or occupancy, you know, I mean, of your facility? I mean, how does it all stack up as far as that's concerned?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, in certain of these buildings, like Bukit Merah and Ubi, are both in buildings where you can have subtenants without any restriction. So we bought these buildings and they have very high occupancy in terms of just general industrial tenants. And then as the tenancies expire, we will not renew those. Yeah. We will then do our own activity. So if you say the tenancy occupancy goes down and the self-storage occupancy goes up, and ultimately will be completely inversed like that, right? In say a Storefriendly Center, this is a JTC building, and regulations dictate that you can only have 30% of the space rented out to other uses, and you must occupy 70% of the space yourself. So then, you know, you have subtenants to support you with some basic tenancy income, with little service to that, right? And then the other 70% you then fill up with self-storage activities. Now, then it becomes a matter of how quickly can you fill up that space. And then we hit on the crux of the matter, which is that self-storage, at the end of the day, very much is a marketing-focused activity. Mm. It has to be a good, strong, and attractive brand to grow the business quickly. And for that, so you know, you must fill up 70%, and in this case here, we go up to say 70,000 square feet of self-storage space that must be filled up. A good operator in our industry will grow the business about a unit a day, storage unit a day, but we will have 2,000 storage units in Storefriendly Center. So that's 2,000 days. That's quite a while, right? So we do all kinds of activity to complement, which is why we also lean on a greater interpretation of self-storage and pitch to, say, business-focused customers and make co-working spaces, etc. Right. So that we can utilize the space quickly and in a complementary way. And that's where that really comes from.
It's fascinating, and I think I've always found it a very, very interesting alternative real estate investment play, I hope you'll let us revisit with you next year. Perhaps I'll tap Kevin as well here in Hong Kong to see if we can actually go and have a look at some of the facilities. But fascinating, and I wish you both the very best, and thank you for a very, very interesting presentation. Yeah, I wish you well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, it's my pleasure to do this kind of thing. We see our very much, we have a specific product, but we are real estate focused play, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So I hope there was some interest to your audience.